Let's now move on to our third main topic today. Chris, what is our third main topic today?
Third topic's from Austin. Deadline released an article this week about Emma Watts, Fox's film division head, staying with Disney. Buried in the article was the quote, "Sources familiar with what's going on there tell me that while Watts had to give up the Marvel properties that included Deadpool to Kevin Feige, Feige is Marvel Studios, not Fox. So will Deadpool end up being in the MCU? John, do you think he will?"
So this started, I'll tell you, every once in a while something happens where on my social media, I just start getting floods of messages. And I started getting floods of messages about this yesterday. Yeah, there is an article where in that article, there is a line, I believe in the third paragraph, referring to, as they mentioned in the message, that, you know, part of Fox merging in with Emma Watts meant losing the Marvel properties, and they mentioned Deadpool specifically, going back over to Kevin Feige. Clearly, that also includes the major ones, Fantastic Four, X-Men, things like that, which we all already knew. So does this actually mean that Deadpool is not, as a matter of fact, going to be in the Fox universe, but rather will be over in the MCU? Because after all, the article says Deadpool, right? Okay, there's something we need, before we get to answering that question, there's something very important we need to keep in mind. At CinemaCon, Alan Horn, the head guy of all movie production when it comes to Disney, he's the guy, everybody at Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Disney Film, they all answer to Alan Horn. And Alan Horn only answers to Bob Iger. So Alan Horn comes out on stage and he talked about Deadpool. He mentioned Deadpool several times. He even brought up like a social media message from Ryan Reynolds, and he put that up on the screen. Part of that presentation, he laid out the upcoming, Disney properties. Never mentioned Deadpool. Mentioned some of the upcoming Marvel properties. Doesn't mention Deadpool. But then when he starts talking about the upcoming Fox projects, he does list Deadpool under Fox. Okay, so just keep that in mind for context. Now we get this quote. To me, you would think that a big reversal on a massive, huge property like Deadpool was now going to officially be in the MCU. That's not line 4 on paragraph 3 of a different story. That's a headline story. That's a story. You run that as a story, clearly. But this was rather tucked away under, by the way, I believe you know Emma. Do you not, Robert? I think
I've only met her a couple of times. Right, I met her at screen, but yes, I have met her.
But I know you've spoken highly of her. You have a lot of stuff. So
she's an incredible executive. She's, as far as production executives go, she's one of the highest regarded in Hollywood.
So this was a story about the fact that there were some rumors going around that there were other studios trying to poach her now that Fox had been eaten into Disney. But she appeared at CinemaCon, and it seems like this story's about that. Keep this in mind. We have actually talked on this show several times, Robert, over the past just 6 months about these oddly placed lines that were buried in a story about something else that just ultimately turned out to really be nothing. Do you remember also coming out of this trade, there was a story about the current state of the DCEU, and down buried in like paragraph 8, there was a line including Ben Affleck, who will be reprising Batman later on. And everybody was like, wait a minute, what? Ben Affleck is still Batman? It says right there. It says Batman is still Ben Affleck. And clearly that was just, a small research error. That was just, temporary brain freeze. Clearly it wasn't true. And we've done several topics, Rob, over the past several months about that. Something seemingly major being buried in a story somewhere else, turns out it was just much ado about nothing. I kind of believe that that's what we're dealing with here. Now look, don't get me wrong. If Deadline came out and said, headline, we have exclusively learned that Deadpool is in fact going to be in the MCU. Well, that's different. That's a horse of a different color. Then you're talking about that. But for this to be a throwaway line buried in a subparagraph of a different story altogether, including, by the way, the line is the Marvel properties. Like, it was throwing in Deadpool with all those things. I think this is something we don't pay attention to, honestly, because if we were reading a story about how Disneyland was going to be renovating their bathrooms, and on paragraph 9, it mentioned Disney also owns Star Wars, which George Lucas will come back to direct episode 10, blah, blah, blah. Would we actually believe that George Lucas is coming back to direct episode 10? No, but clearly we would all run headlines about this. So I'm leaning right now towards, well, not an impossibility, Rob. Not an impossibility. I'm just going to discard this because I think this is just one of those other situations like the Ben Affleck line and one of their other stories. That's how I see it right now. Do you think there's more weight to this though, Rob? The way you look at this, how do you see it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. What happens in the fan community is we don't quite get that the rest of the world doesn't see our fandom or fan things that are that we're interested in the same way. So when they're talking about the Marvel properties, in their minds, they're not getting into, they don't know the difference between Deadpool, the Fantastic Four, or the X-Men.
Right.
They're just all lumped under one umbrella. And the fact that Emma Watts oversaw the production of Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2, it makes sense that she's very familiar with how those things go. And the reporters, Deadpool is a Marvel property. The reporters are not going in going, oh, right, you know, Deadpool's kind of its own thing. It didn't really exist within the... So they don't get the nuances that we as fans are hanging on. So I wouldn't put a lot of credence in this. I think we're going to see Deadpool still, if they make a Deadpool 3 or an X-Force, it's going to come out as a Fox film. Now, that's not to say that Deadpool can't one day be in the MCU because they have the rights to do it. But that's a $750 million plus franchise. They're not going to mess with it. They want to make that $750 million plus amount of money
on like $100 million budget.
On 100 million, yeah, on 65 with Deadpool 1, and they're going to keep that. And Emma Watts is a big reason why they were able to make those movies for the price they made them. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, and I think there's two separate questions here, Rob. The two separate questions are this: what is possible and what is probable?
Right.
Is it possible, despite what Alan Horn presented at CinemaCon, despite what Bob Iger has said in the past, despite all that, is it possible that we could see a change of direction and actually see Deadpool, PG-13, or maybe still are, in the MCU? Yeah, I think it's possible. I do. But now let's move over to the question, is it probable? No. I mean, the probability is that it's not. They're going to keep Deadpool just the way he has worked already. Under Fox, separate from the MCU. He's worked great there. Alan Horn's affirmed that. Bob Iger's affirmed that. Possible? Yes. Probable? No. And I don't think this story kind of changes our minds one way or the other about it.
You know, John, also, I love, there's an earnestness and a purity, if this makes any sense, to the MCU. And Deadpool would disrupt that. And I like the fact that Deadpool, I love my X-Men too, but I like the way that Deadpool could make fun of things like the X-Men that I love without being in the X-Men movie proper, even though there's the X-Men cameo in the last Deadpool. I don't know if I want Deadpool in the MCU. Not currently. I want to see an Eternals that I can believe in. I want to see a Shang-Chi. So before Shang-Chi is like made fun of, I want to see a kick-ass Shang-Chi movie first.
Oh, I guarantee you that's going to be kick-ass. I guarantee you that movie's going to be awesome to watch. So I agree with you. I think you raise a really valid point there. And look, again, could they? And look, you and I talked about this before. If Kevin Feige were to come out and say, like with everything you've just said, we're going to do kind of a Joker what-if movie, and we're going to do a Deadpool kills the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Oh my God, sign me up. Completely. Like, you want to do that? Sign me up. Otherwise, I agree with you. I think you don't mess with the formula that's worked, and I don't think this story changes that. Question is, guys, you've probably seen that quote floating around. Do you think there's more weight to it than we think there is? Jump on down to the comment section below and let us know what you think. Okay.